Welcome back to the hottest show in the galaxy. It's the Karen Hunter Show. We're here on SiriusXM Urban View. We're talking powers and becomes action. And many of you may or may not know, but I started my career as a writer, first as a journalist at the New York Daily News. And while I was at the news, I wrote my first book. I Make My Own Rules with LL Cool J. So that sparked a whole what do they call that? Ghostwriting. I wasn't really ghost because my name's on all of the books. I did a book with him, Queen Latifah, Mason Betha, Reverend Al Sharpton. I did On the Down Low. I did Confessions of a Video Vixen. I did 3, 4, 5 books with Wendy Williams. I've done novels. I've been a writer. I've written 30 plus books. I have 8 New York Times bestsellers, and I've published 30 plus books. And I am now tasked with writing a book right now, and it is wearing me out. I feel like it is not like riding a bike. It is not, you don't just get back on. And let me welcome to the show. He has a book. He's been here before. We talked about race and the Civil War, the next Civil War. That was his other book, The Next Civil War. But I was like, he just did a book on writing and failure. I need him back. Let me welcome back to the show, the one and only Stephen Marche. Welcome back.
Hey, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I feel like I don't want to talk about me anymore. I want to talk about what it's like to write a book with LL Cool J. That sounds.
It was actually so let's we were both in our 20s, so it meant and he was way smarter and he was just freaking brilliant. He was one of the smartest people I've ever worked with. Brilliant, like and complicated and different and interesting, sure. But brilliant. And at 26, man, listen, to this day is one of my best books because I think he participated more than just about everybody because so I'll just give you the backstory. Again, he was 26, so he's out in the streets doing a lot of things. And it was during a particular time when being sexually prolific was not necessarily healthy. And so, I was asking him questions. He was very guarded. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this book. So I ended up making up because I didn't know anything. It was my first book. They told me I had a deadline. I finished the book in 3 months. I'm like, all right, dude's not participating. I would show up, sit 4 or 5 hours with his grandmother. He would be sleeping. So I wasn't able to get a lot of information from him. So I'm like, I made up like half of the book. I pieced it together. I'm a writer. Right. And before I submitted it to the publisher, we spent 2 nights. We did 2 all-nighters where he went through every page and he was like, where'd you get this story? I was like, I made it up. And then he realized the light bulb went on like, oh, this chick is about to just fabricate my whole entire life. I better participate. So he went through every line, every page for 2 nights at the Daily News. We were in my boss's office, ordered pizza, stayed there till 4 o'clock in the morning. I brushed my teeth and went to my desk to work hours later. And it was the real stories were so much better than the ones I made up.
Well, that's always the way, right? I mean, that's always the way in this world. The real stories are always better than anything you can make up. I mean, especially with a guy like LL Cool J, obviously.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Who could imagine?
At this point, I had to no, we're not going to tell that whole story. No, we're going to have to pull back on that.
Let's get a third of that one. We'll keep a third of that one. Stay out of court.
Yeah, we need you to have a career. So at the point that he realized this book was going to happen and he was going to participate, he needed to participate. He did. He came all in, and it was a great experience. And it was a New York Times bestseller. So there we go. Yeah. But enough of that. I've never considered myself a writer because I think journalism is more of a skill and a craft than it is creative until my first book. When did you look at yourself as a writer?
From the beginning, like from the time I was 12, 13.
Okay.
I mean, that's how I always saw myself. And there was really no other path for me. So I just, like from the very beginning, I thought I was a writer. And even kind of, I mean, I was happy to write anything. You know what I mean? Like I was like I like to write to this day. I mean, I write, I wrote the Next Civil War book you had me on about, but I write little essays like this. I write essays for the New Yorker and stuff. I write short stories that nobody reads. I like to write. And so I am a writer for sure.
So you get up in the middle of the night with an idea and do you have a notepad next to your bed? Like what's your process?
Yeah. Well, it started when I had kids, when I started getting up at like 4 a.m, right? And then because that's the only time I could find to write. So I'm still that way. I still like, I wake up at about 4 a.m. I work until everyone wakes up. I make breakfast for everyone. I do my work. I have a nap every day, which is the secret to life, if you want my opinion. And then I go back and write. That's more my method. But yeah, sometimes I get so obsessed with things that I wake up in the middle of the night. I find like, I don't know about if it's part of being a writer, it is, but I actually sometimes I just get so interested in things that it's just electric. I become so fascinated by them that I can't stop thinking about them. You know what I mean?
I
That's a
do.
good state to be. Yeah.
We're similar, except
Yeah.
I'm not driven by the writing. I'm driven by the dissemination of the words.
Right.
Like I don't write for the same reason that you write. I'm not compelled to write. As a matter of fact, I hate
Right.
writing.
Yeah.
It's the bane
I'm
of my
compulsive
existence right
writer,
now.
for sure I am. I'm a
Yeah.
compulsive. It's like, I was talking to a friend of mine who lost his house gambling during COVID. And he asked me, like, what's your vice? Because like everyone has a vice, right? Like,
Yes.
and it's like, I never really had, like, and I was thinking about it because, I drink and whatever, like I've, gone down certain pathways, but I always come back, right? Like I never go all the way down the path, if you know what I mean. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I think writing is my vice. Like writing is my compulsive loner behavior that I have to do, that I need to feel right, right? That I need to feel like I'm right with the world. And I don't know if that's healthy or super unhealthy, but what choice do I have?
Well, if that is who you are, you must do
Yeah,
it. I mean, we're
exactly.
the thing that drives you is the thing you were put here to do. Stephen Marche, you are
Yeah.
a writer.
Yeah.
You are a writer. So, who sparked that in you at 12? Was it a book that you came across, or was it a teacher?
I had a really, really weird teacher in grade 6 to 8 who was this. I mean, it's so strange to describe, but he was like he's like a retired military guy. And so you'd come into the room and he made you like stand to attention and like walk around the room. And then he would only allow us to read 16th century poetry. So like Sir Philip Sidney, John Donne, Ben Jonson, people like this. And he taught us how to write very rigidly. Like in grade 6, it was only sentences. And then in grade 5, and then the next grade, it was paragraphs. And then the next grade, it was 3-paragraph essays. And so it was this very regimented thing, which was, I still make my living from what that guy taught me, right? That's
Wow.
that's why, that's why if the New York Times calls me up and wants an op-ed, I can do it, right? Like, no, like there's no problem with that. But then when I hit puberty and I hit high school and I started reading other things, like John Keats just hit me like a hand grenade, right? And all these other poets and stuff, just like, because I had that, like, I was kind of locked in a little world of this very rigid kind of language. And so then when other stuff started coming in, I mean, it just all really hit me
It's like a
hard.
fire hose, like a fire
Yeah,
hose.
it just blew me away, right? And that was, and it sort of was that discipline kind of gave me, which was insane. I mean, I've never met a single other person except me who had that education. Really a 19th century education, sentence graphs and all that stuff. And we're starting with declarative sentences, then compound sentences, then compound complex sentences, and like all that, all that stuff. And and it just hit me. It just really hit me.
I'm jealous because I feel like maybe I would have been turned on like that too. 19th century is my jam. That right. Genre, minus the slavery and the colonization. But if from a literature standpoint,
that's a big
though,
butt, you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, minus that, right? Minus the fact that my people were in chains, but the writing of that period, is still to this day. You got Shonda Rhimes out there creating Bridgerton off of that, off of that period of time, because it was romantic. It was restrictive, but at the same time, there was all of this, friction, and it's a sexy period. I get it.
I mean, to me, it was the Renaissance. To me, it was Shakespeare and the revenge tragedies, which I ended up doing my PhD on, like, particularly things like Hamlet, and then revenge tragedies like Marlowe, Webster, and so on. And then I taught that at City College for a while.
Oh,
my
okay. So
left.
I'm sorry, Dr. Stephen Marche. I
Well,
need
I
to be
am, yeah, but I
respectful.
haven't used it. I haven't
And
used it in a
don't
long
like,
time.
we're
Yeah,
gonna
I
use
don't
it
think
here
I
because
don't know.
anybody that went and got a PhD, you're gonna get your doctor from me.
I
Dr.
don't.
Stephen Marsh is here.
Honestly, that's one of the easier things to do is get a PhD.
Is
in
it?
this, I think so. I mean,
Well,
compared to writing a novel,
you're
compared to
saying
writing
that.
a book with LL
Wait,
Cool
you're
J,
saying
it's
that as no. Well, you're saying that as a person for whom I'm sure your advisors didn't look at you as somebody that's not worthy of getting one. And I know several of my friends who have had a hard time with their dissertations with advisors who were super racist and sending them through all kinds of hoops. So, there's a whole new
right.
world out there. There's a different world than where you come from,
Oh, of
Mr.
course.
Marsh.
Well, I come from Canada, so
Well,
yeah, it's a very
there you
different
go.
world.
There you go. The book is called On Writing and Failure. Stephen King is my jam. I cut my teeth on Stephen King and Richard Bachman and Thinner, and The Stand was one of the first books and was like really thick. After Roots, that was the thickest book that I've read. And I, as a 11, 12-year-old, I was in the world immersed in all kind of Stephen King crazy. And I just fell in love with all of his stuff. And I read On Writing, a memoir of the craft, when I became an official writer. And to this day, it is one of the best books on writing that I think is out there. Until this one.
Right.
Have you read this? Have you read On Writing a Memoir? Yes.
Sure.
And how is this similar or different?
Well, I don't want to take anything away from his book because it's really good and it's really frank. But it's a different kettle of fish when your experience of writing is being paid several $100,000 for your first book and never looking back, and being able to write being able to write Cujo, which he has basically no memory of because he was blackout drunk during the whole time, and still making millions of dollars of it. Do you know what I mean? Like I find that I wrote this book for people to know what it's really like to be a writer. And I think the mythology around writing is so it's so romantic, and it's so it always implies this of course with Stephen King, he's a massive success, hugely successful, and writing is really much more about failure than it is about success. Any writing career, with very very few exceptions, like Stephen King. So I don't find it's a great book to read. It's certainly a great insight into his experience, but I never found it really useful in terms of getting me through the day, in terms of what does it mean to actually write and to live as a writer. It just did not jibe at all with my experience.
Okay, maybe I was such a fan that, and then
it's excellent. I'm not
slightly delusional.
I'm not doubting it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Your book, On Writing and Failure, Stephen Marsh. Mm-hmm. I say this all the time, that perfection is a process. I think we get caught up in wins and losses in this country, in this world, as opposed to the experience itself, right? So life is to be lived. You fall, you get up, you bust your lip, you put a Band-Aid and get some stitches, keep it pushing, learn something from it. Okay, let me step over that crack and not bust my ass next time. Mm-hmm. For you as a writer, and it is more failure than it is what we call failure. I call lessons. I just call them lessons. That's how you learn, right? Is through making mistakes, right? Your biggest failure, Stephen Marsh, in your mind as a writer.
My biggest failure? Well, I guess what I've always felt is what I've felt, the torture that applies to me. I don't know if it's a personal failure. This book is not necessarily about making mistakes or anything like that, right? But I have felt the best things I've written have been the ones that nobody's paid attention to, right? For sure, I felt that throughout my whole life. The things that I spent years writing. I wrote a book called Love and the Mess We're In, which, is absolutely the favorite thing I've ever written of my own.
Slow down, well,
you can't even
Marsh.
find it.
Spell it. Love where?
And the mess we're in, right?
And the mess we're in. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just it was only published in Canada because it was the aftermath of the 2008 crisis. No one was publishing anything for 2 years. It's not. This is a business where you don't have a lot of control. You don't have a lot of autonomy over your own decisions or over the fate of your books. And that's just reality, right? That's just part of the nature of this business, right? And coming to accept that, I think, is pretty hard. But so I don't know if it's the worst failure, but I definitely feel like there's a particular part of me that feels like the better I write something, the less likely anyone is to read it. Which is really, whereas on the other hand, I can whip off a 1,000-word column that will be read by 10 million people, right? Like for newspaper, right? Like, and that's it's out of my control, but it makes it hard to sort of think like, okay, well, it's still worthwhile to write really well and to do what I can to make the best stuff that I can possibly make. Even if it, goes to some small literary journal where it's read by 30 people, 15 of whom hate it, right? Like that's a sort of tough thing to face.
I know this is your jam because you didn't talk about the next Civil War with this much passion. Just gonna say it. I'm just gonna put it out there, Dr. Marche.
Well, the next Civil War is a brutal reality. I mean, no one wants to talk about it. Like, it's important to talk about. You know what I mean? Well, also, I don't know about you, but like, I've only talked to a few people about this book so far, but like among writers, I feel like there's a relief in talking about it. You know what I mean? Like, you're so used to dealing with, I'm sure you're way into this more than the next Civil War too, because you're sitting there thinking like, yeah, he's right. Like, I've been sitting here with all my failures, not talking about them, not being able to think about them, trying to push them to the side of my mind. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It is the substance of what I do, right? I mean, like, that's the feeling I'm getting from this book. I don't know, like,
Yeah, no,
it's good to talk about.
Because writers are solitary beings, you're absolutely in your own headspace. You may have an editor, but it's you. And right now, the words on that paper used to be, pen and paper, used to be typewriter. I've been through all of that. And now it's the computer. It's you and your thoughts in the words. And no one can actually help you. No one can help you do this. This is something that you have to figure out, So I was like so excited. The book is on writing and failure. And I'm going to make a prediction, Stephen Marche, that Love and the Mess We're In, 50 years after you're dead, is going to be like a best-selling book. They're going to make it into movies. It's going to be like a phenomenon. It's going to be T-shirts and mugs. And your grandchildren will be able to say, my granddad did that.
From your mouth to God's ear. I mean,
I bet honestly, I put it out there.
Yeah.
Well, I plan on being
I think
around,
the other thing is you don't know the readers, right? And that's the other thing about being a writer. Like, I'm so jealous of like stand-up comedians and musicians, right? Because they like actually see the reactions to things. Like, they see the people, like when you write something, like you don't actually, it happens in somebody else's soul when they're alone, right? And so you don't actually see what it does to somebody. And that, I think, also is, it makes it harder to bear, right? Like, it makes it so much harder to feel what you're doing as a real activity, right? Rather than something that you're doing just, at your desk, for yourself.
Okay. Stephen Marche. I'm working on a book right now that I can't seem to finish.
All right, let's talk it through, Kim. Let's get the discipline going here.
All right. And I don't, let me tell you how bad it got this weekend. Because I don't get writer's block, but this weekend I cleared out 7,500 email from my email inbox instead of writing the 3 chapters. I cleaned my baseboards. I think I cleaned out my refrigerator. I might have drywalled a new room. I was doing anything. Right. I went to the supermarket, anything. And then I would get up, Stephen. I was like, I'm going to write 3 chapters today. I would get in front of the computer, and then the emails distracted me. And then I got phone calls, and I was like, I'm turning off everything. And then I was like, I wonder what's happening with this new TV show on HBO Max.
Last of Us, I have to watch that, or else like what?
Yes. What is wrong with me? And it's due. It was due last week, right? So the book was due last week. And in my mind, because months ago, I was like, I figured it out. Because it's like, because you got to put it together. It's like a giant puzzle. And then the pieces started falling into place. And I was like, I'm going to knock this out.
Right.
And then, then it didn't happen.
Well, I don't need to give you any advice. You don't need any advice because you already know what's wrong and you know what to do here.
Oh, my God. Right? Well, tell me anyway. Right? Tell me anyway. Because I'm...
You know that, like, first of all, this is part of the process. Like, you're obviously, like, this is part of, like, you need to write it in a different space than you were in that weekend, like, obviously, right? Like that's part of reality. And you're not the first human being on earth to procrastinate over a book. That's like literally everyone who's ever written a book. And if they didn't publish books that were past deadline, there wouldn't be any published books. So you know all of that stuff, right? Like then the other thing you know is that you're going to have to dig yourself a deep hole and go into it and finish it. Like you're going to have to find some way. It's going to be, I mean, you know, you could pull out all the stops and go to a hotel and turn off the Wi-Fi, but like you're going to like, that's why I wake at 4 a.m. I mean, if you're connected to the internet, why on earth would you want to write? Like every movie on earth is right there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so you're going to have to find the space where it's just you alone in a room with the words and wrestle with the angel. But you already know that. I mean, like, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Like, you already know that's the process.
So for you, you get up at 4 a.m. And I say it's either 4 a.m. or you start at 2 or 1 or 2 a.m, because there's something to be said for, I look at it like this, and I know this doesn't make any sense, but I feel like there's a finite amount of energy flowing, creativity, and everyone's asleep. But so you have the forces of all, you know, you can tap into all of that because you're not competing with anyone. That's the way I look at it.
Well, it's the ding of the phone, right? I mean, that phone, like there's studies. If your phone is in your room, you're dumber. Like you become stupider if your phone is in your room, right? And it makes sense because it's like at 4 a.m, I'm not going to get an important email. For like, there's just nothing. There's just, and similarly at 11 o'clock at night, you're not really going to get an important email. So you need to be in those spaces where you can't be in the where you can't be on the internet, where there's no point being on the internet. That's kind of, you're kind of forcing that by being up at 4 a.m. Or, I mean, every pro writer I know is either starts work at like 9 p.m. or starts work at 4 a.m. It seems to be like one or the other. Right? Nobody ever wrote anything at 3 p.m. Right?
You're absolutely correct.
Like no one, like nothing ever happened there at that hour of the day. Right. And, you know, I think, I mean, one thing I do really believe in sleep. You know, I mean, like, I really believe that there's people who like try not to sleep, like they are proud about how little they sleep. I think that's insane. I think if you're trying to write a book on deadline, you got to get, I mean, 8 is a minimum, but you got to, I mean, it's like eating protein when you're a bodybuilder. You need to consume a lot of sleep. If you really want to be productive, if you really want to finish those 3 chapters, like get 10 hours one night. You'll wake up and it'll come. You know what I mean? So that's, I mean,
come on, tell the truth.
Right.
You are so right. Stephen Marche, you are. And let me tell y'all, I get my sleep. Mama does not play with her rest. Okay.
Don't fool around with that.
Brain needs the restoring properties. On Writing and Failure. Now the subtitle is, or on the peculiar perseverance required to endure the life of a writer.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about perseverance. What does that look like in the life of Stephen Marche?
Oh, in my case, well, my problems are, I mean, you know, this book is full of like Dostoevsky being like, you know, the SARS, and he went through mock execution where they like took him out and pretended to kill a whole group of people, and then said, oh, at the last minute, hey, we're not going to do it. And then he was sent to prison for 4 years, and he had real problems. I mean, my problems are that I get rejected a lot, but that's not, I mean, as you know, that's just life. Like, that's just like, there's and you know, one of the things that's great about aging a bit and about learning from experience is that you realize that everybody gets rejected all the time. There's never a place that you get to where you're not being rejected. Right. Like, that is the nature of this business. Like, if you were like, the only thing that changes is who you get rejected by and maybe the tone of the rejection, but that's really it. So yeah, my problems are, you know, negligible. I'm talking, you know, some of these stories in here about like, you know, how Machiavelli wrote The Prince after he was tortured, right? Like that required real perseverance. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about Baldwin. Tell me about somebody
Baldwin,
who looks like me.
definitely...
Tell me about Baldwin, Stephen Marche. Tell me somebody that I love, because I don't care about Melville. I'm gonna just let you know.
Well, there's some interesting stories in it because there's I mean, the sort of basic theme of the book is Baldwin's, right? Because he said, like, the opening quote of the book is from Baldwin, where it's like he said, their talent isn't worth much. I know plenty of talented ruins. What you really require to I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but what you really require to survive in this business is endurance, luck, and endurance, right? And that's a very brilliant phase. I mean, there's also about Alex Haley. There's a pretty interesting story about him in there, where he had a pretty ordinary career until Roots. I mean, a struggling writer career, and then with Roots, there's a scene where he is being flown in the Reader's Digest private jet, and this is in the days when, like, Reader's Digest, like, was lord of American media, right? And they, like, flew him in a private jet. Would you like a cigar, Mr. Haley? Would you like, there's brandy here, there's like a whole spread in the plane, you know what I mean? Like, and all he thinks about the entire flight is his rejections. And which I just think is, like, the most amazing test. That's exactly how writers are. It's like, it doesn't matter where you are. You're, like, flying in a private jet, and all you're thinking about is, like, yeah, I really showed these bastards. They rejected me back in the day, and look where I am now. Like, it's perfect like that. But yeah,
let me say this. It's not that I don't care about people who don't look like me, but throughout, as an English major, I was inundated with everybody that wasn't me until I got to college, right? And so I grew up with Tale of Two Cities and Willa Cather and Jack London's racist ass and all, it's like you get indoctrinated into a way of thinking through the lens of other people. And Alex Haley, was important, but not just for Roots, which I read in the fifth grade.
Good journalist too.
Yeah, and the autobiography of Malcolm X, which has been a global success as well. But I just wanted to say that
Baldwin, Baldwin is like the master essayist, right? I mean, like, he's like the best essayist of the 20th century, right? I mean, the interesting thing about Baldwin right now is that he's like, because he's so involved in political movements, we're in this racial reevaluation, so he's been restored in that way. But, like, he's the person who brought the French style of essay into American magazines, right? Like, and that's, to me, is like, I mean, that's, those works are just so important simply on terms of, like, the style of the essay. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is very much, I would say, aspirational Baldwin essay on my part. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I do. Like, it's in terms of style, right? In terms of style, anyway.
Let me just thank you, because writers, again, don't get a chance to talk with other writers like this,
I know, it's true, right?
And you did a whole book where you explored all of the possibilities. And I think it's important. Anybody listening, what advice do you give to somebody who, I get these emails all the time. Will you help me write my book? And I say, no, I'm not. Start writing your book, because part of being a writer is to write. I'm not going to help you. Help yourself. It's your story. Own it. Get an editor, but write. What advice would you give to somebody who's, I have a book in me?
Well, like what Baldwin said is, like, there's no advice to give somebody. Like, either you're going to write or you're not going to write, and nothing you can say one way or the other is going to help them. Like, go out, I mean, I think the only advice I have, it's not really advice. It's just like a perspective of somebody who's been doing this as a freelancer for like 20 years, is that when you're out trying to make books and trying to sell them and hustling, that's it. Like, you're not any different when you're in that moment than Ian McEwan, right? Or whoever. Like, it's the good news is kind of the same as the bad news. Like, this is what it looks like. There's no place where you're going to get to where it's going to be like you're free and you get to do just what you want, and you get, and it comes all easily. Like, no one ever, that doesn't exist really. Right. And so, I guess the advice, it's not really advice. It's just like, you have to understand that this is it. Like, you trying to figure out how to write your book and try to sell it and try to get it out there. Like, if you want to do, that's what this business is. It's not anything else.
That is it. And write for your soul. not for a market. That's my advice. Don't write for a market.
Certainly don't write for fame or money. Like that's, that's like if that's what you're trying to do, if you're trying to write to get famous and rich, like please stop. Like, there's no point. You're not going to write well, and that's not a real sensible way to go about those things. There's a lot better ways to go about doing that.
I couldn't agree more. Stephen Marche, The Next Civil War, we love that. On writing and failure, come on through, or on writing and failure, or on the peculiar perseverance required to endure the life of a writer. Stephen Marche, you have done it. You have done it, sir. Thank you for being here.
Always great to talk to you, Karen.
All right, before you click off, thank you. Thank you. What's your go-to for breakfast?
My go-to for breakfast? Yeah. I mean, I'm getting old, so, it's like granola. I mean, it's okay.
All right. Goodbye. That's what you. Goodbye. All right. Goodbye. Nice to see you. Come on back anytime.
All right. We'll do.
All right. All right. Bye-bye.